Welcome to the Heritage Show, where we explore healing, empowerment, and resilience of Asian women. I'm your host, Ling, a wellness and resilience coach. In each episode, I chat with an amazing woman who's conquering challenges, embracing her unique identities, and live life on her own terms. Get ready for inspiring stories, laughs, and powerful aha moments. So grab your favorite drink, get cozy, and let's dive in. Today, we're joined by an amazing guest, Amie. Born in Taiwan and raised in Los Angeles, Amie's life has been full of creativity and adventure. She studied in Italy, became an art director in New York City, and lived in cities all over the world. Now living in Berlin, Amie has switched from her successful design career to focus on making art and helping others. During the pandemic, she started a company called The Cool Auntie, which supports child-free women over 40 years old in finding purpose and rediscovering their passions. With her background in psychology, graphic design, and international experience, Amie brings a unique view on life, creativity, and personal growth. So let's hear about her amazing journey. Hello, Amie. Welcome to the Heritage Show. I'm so excited to have you here. And congratulations for the recent launch on the Cool Auntie and so many other exciting projects. Thank you for coming here.
Thank you, Lynn. It's my pleasure and honor to be here today. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Cool. So as I already introduced to our audience about Amie, so I will jump right in with the first question. So Amie, what is your mission and what are the impact are you trying to make in this world?
During the intro, you've already alluded to the fact that I've grown up between 3 different continents, starting in Asia and then the US and now in Europe for over 10 years. So I think being exposed to so many different places and experiences allow me to realize that there's really a lot more to life than this kind of prescribed program. You know, that going to school, get a job, find a partner, get married, and then have a kid and buy a house, etc., etc. And I think just at a very earlier stage in my life, I realized that that's not what I wanted. Yeah. And also the woman in my life. And I feel like a lot of them, including my own mother, might have not chosen the path that she's on if she had the option to, and I think we live in a different generation that afford us a lot more choices than the previous generations. And also the fact that society label women who didn't take the program, you know what I mean? Like as like leftover women, or in the UK, they call them spinsters. And it's as if a woman who didn't get married and become a mother has somehow failed at life somehow. And I think that's very problematic. So the idea of the Cool Auntie community came when I was also struggling with my own choices of, I didn't get married. I'm now in my late 40s and I'm not a mother. And so I was wondering, like, then what am I doing with my life? Did I fail? Am I a leftover? Am I a spinster? And I think there needs to be a space for women to exist without the society's side-eye and criticism. And I don't think enough of these spaces exist. We kind of just tolerate it, and we're like we're there but we're not, kind of. So I created Cool Auntie, and it's a community centered platform, and our mission is to support child-free women in their 40s and 50s to attain emotional, physical, and financial freedom so they can rediscover their true passion and embrace life with a renewed sense of purpose and joy. And my hope is that the ultimate goal is to uplift women everywhere in the world, right? And so yeah, that's the reason I created the Cool Auntie. And yeah, I think it's going to offer a lot of resources for women like myself who needed a little support
Yeah.
to learn and grow together.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I love that you mentioned this idea about this freedom that perhaps a lot of us want to feel and embody, especially when perhaps if we are pursuing a different life path compared to what society conditioned us to live.
Mhm.
So it's really a great initiative. Thank you.
Thank you.
We know that you've lived in so many cities before, and you moved from New York to Berlin about a decade ago, right? So I really wonder what has inspired that decision and what had helped you to really make that decision for the transition.
Yeah, so to be completely honest, moving to Berlin was not actually a conscious decision, but rather a serendipitous series of events that happened
Yeah.
that led me here. At that time, I was transitioning from an art director into a visual artist. And I applied to an artist residency program that happened to be in Berlin. And I was chosen among 7 other artists who came from all over the world to participate in this kind of experimental art program. And what happened was the program directors wasn't aware that all of us were on a Schengen visa, which is 90 days maximum. And
Mm.
our final exhibition, our group exhibition, was planned past 90 days. And so, which means there's going to be a show where none of the artists were going to be
Yeah.
there. So what happened was, I think it was 2 weeks before our show, they took us to Ausländer Behörde in the middle of the night. And we literally stood outside the whole night. So we got an emergency appointment.
Wow.
And the intention was to get our visas extended. And the guy was so annoying with us. So instead of 2 weeks, he just gave us all 2 years. So
Amazing.
yeah.
What a luck.
Yeah. And so a lot of us didn't plan to stay. And then so we're like, well, now that we have a 2-year visa, maybe we'll just stay a little bit longer. And 2 weeks turned into 10 years in the blink of
Yeah.
an eye. Yeah. So that's kind of how I end up in Berlin. And incidentally, at that time in Brooklyn, my rent also got raised, and a lot of series of events prevent me from going back. So I think it was just kind of just meant to be thing that happened to me rather than like a conscious choice. Yeah.
Yeah. This really remind me of how sometimes a small decision or coincidence can really change your life in a way that you
Absolutely.
would have never imagined. Can you share perhaps some memorable moments when you first arrived in Berlin that really made you think this is the right decision?
Great question. I do remember when I first arrived in Berlin, just like walking down the street, and we're talking about Neukölln, right? Like it's not the
Mm,
most beautiful of neighborhood, but I was just like smiling ear to ear. I think it's this idea of like grass is greener. I don't know, but I was walking down the street and I thought like the sky was bluer, the clouds are fluffier, everything was just brighter. And one thing that really struck me was there really was this. I mean, we're talking about 2014, right? I think it's a
mm,
different Berlin back then, but there
right.
was like a really strong sense of freedom in the air. Like everyone was so laid back. I look into there's parks everywhere. That's another thing I noticed, and people are laying on the grass in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Very
why do
Berlin.
people don't have jobs here or something? And then, or like, cafes are full of people just reading and drinking. And there's just such a different vibe than New York, where everyone is late for something, rushing
Mm,
somewhere, stressed
right.
out. The way we drink coffee is we grab it on the go and we drink it while we're walking. There's no sitting
Exactly.
down. There's no reading a book. So that was definitely really memorable to me. Another thing that was really memorable to me as an artist is that there were so many storefronts that were just vacant at that time. And, this is the era famously where the mayor said like Berlin is poor but sexy. But,
Yeah.
and there's so many programs that subsidize artists. So I see signage where you can apply for an empty store and do an exhibition there. There's just so many things available to people to be creative, and it's not to make a profit. And that was really like, what, in New York, even a tiny little parking spot costs you thousands, in rental a year. And now you have this whole shop where you're like, nobody's using it. So why don't artists make something of it? And that was really also a big eye opener for me.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I moved to Berlin also around like 8 years ago. I can still relate to the feeling that you described. At some point while I was living in Berlin, I was thinking about moving to New York. But when I thought about it, then I was like, I don't want to actually have lunch in front of my computer, rush through the day and always running late, as you said. I decided to stay in Berlin. Turns out to be great.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of New York, another thing that struck out to me was at that time when I left, my rent in New York for a studio apartment was $2,400.
Yeah.
And people said I got a good deal. And
Absolutely.
my entire like 3-room private apartment in Neukölln in 2014 was 580 euros cold and 640 warm. I mean, the price difference was just like incredible. And so I really felt like I can finally breathe and catch my breath after hustling for so many years in New York.
Yeah. Oftentimes when we move to a new country, a new city, in the beginning, there's so many changes and it's so challenging. So how did you overcome in the initial phase, those culture shock, those huge differences?
Yeah. When I first felt cultural shock was when I took a job in Germany, and the work culture is what stood out to me as a very different mentality, if you will, because like they say in America, you live to work, but in Europe, you work to live, right? And I really felt that in the true sense because um, when I worked in New York, if you leave at like 7 p.m., people will be like early night. Everyone wants to stay. There's some kind of trophy mentality. The later you stay means the harder you work and somehow the more prestige. But here, I remember at one of my jobs, I was an art director. I had 2 designers working under me, and they would start packing up at like 5:30. And I'm looking at them like, what are you doing? And they're like, and then by 6, literally, computer closed, they're gone. And initially I was like, there's such bad work ethic here. Like, how did they get anything done? And then I realized that they also gave me like 25 vacation days a year in part of my pay package. In the US, you're lucky if you get 10. So that was a really big shock for me, is that they really don't focus on working hard or like blindly in a way. Yeah.
I feel the same. When I moved to Berlin, I always was the first one arriving in the office and the last one leaving the office. To me, it was really a challenging period of time because like you said, I could not understand why people could just finish work this early and don't need to feel guilty about it. I seem to still carry this strong sense of work ethics, and we need to show up always the first one, leave the last one. But of course, later I learned it's not about work hard, it's about work smarter, but it's also about actually not identify yourself wholly as someone who work in a workplace, but have so much more as a human being.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, amazing. So with your Asian heritage, your upbringing in US, and your experience living in Europe, how this unique mix impacted your identity, and where do you feel the home is?
I think about this question a lot, if not every day, because I encounter situations that will activate a different side of me. And then I sometimes even consciously feel like, oh, I'm dealing with this in a very Asian way, or, I'm being so American right now, this kind of thing. But you know what's funny is when I first moved to Berlin, I kept telling people, you can take a girl out of New York, but you can't take the New York out of the girl. So I think when I first arrived in Berlin, there was like a chip on my shoulder, and I kept identifying as this like strong, fierce New Yorker because I was adapting, I was adjusting. And the truth is, I kind of feel like I don't belong anywhere, but I also fit in everywhere. Does that
Mm.
make sense? Like there's no
Yeah.
sense of like deep belonging in any particular place, but I can go anywhere and be at home. There's
Mm.
not adjustment curve for me just because I've been exposed to so much and I've traveled so much. So it's a kind of paradox, but it's also very interesting for me because when I go to Taiwan, I feel like a foreigner. And then when I go to the US, I never felt American fully, you know?
Mm.
And then, I mean, I think I'm almost strangely more comfortable in Berlin because in Berlin, I'm very obviously a foreigner.
Yeah.
So I don't seek that like to blend in or anything like that
Mm.
because I'll never be German and I'm not
Yeah.
born here or I didn't grow up here. So in a way, I actually feel more comfortable being here because my identity is therefore in contrast more clear. Yeah.
Mm.
So, in terms of where I feel most belonging, I think like when I think about these three, like the triculture that I was brought up with, it all comes down to values, right? For example, I'm Asian in the sense that like I'm respectful to the elders, I'm kind of practical, I'm very polite, and I'm humble. I'm
Yeah.
not like driven egotistically. But I think I'm American in the sense that I'm very ambitious. I want to
There's a
do something.
hustle.
I want to,
Yeah.
yeah, hustle. I
Yeah.
think like I get really bored when I'm not doing or making a project. I'm
Mm.
always working on something. I'm American in the sense that I am friendly. I'm open. I can talk to a stranger and I can blend in a lot of ways. I don't have this like big wall or distance between. Europe taught me how to kind of enjoy life. I think there's the appreciation for aesthetics, right?
Yeah.
Going to the museums to just, look at something beautiful,
Mm. Slow
Um,
down.
yeah, yeah, and this like pursuit of la dolce vita, right? Like
Mm.
this like sweet life. In a way,
Yeah.
like it's also like hedonism. It's
It's
like pleasure to the body, pleasure to the senses, and yeah. So I think I gain a lot of things from each of my time spent in each of these cultures. It's also a really beautiful way to kind of like find a balance, right? I think
mm.
everywhere you go, there's going to be merits and there's going to be, some disadvantage or, their faults or flaws. But it's like being able to identify these merits and kind of like, balance them together and
Yeah.
be able to understand what works for you also. And I
Mm.
don't take it for granted. I think I'm, extremely lucky in the sense that I can legally reside in three continents. I know I'm very lucky. But in terms of like where I ultimately find belonging, I do have to say recently I have been thinking a lot about this concept of like fallen leaves, like 落叶归根.
Mm. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Chinese say like when the leaf that falls return to the root,
Mm-hmm.
and this has been resonating more and more for me. And so as I get older, I feel like there's a draw for me to go back to Asia to find my roots, and I feel more and more comfortable there. And I mean, just to be honest, in recent years, I just find like people are nicer, the food tastes better, and then
Yeah.
the healthcare system in Taiwan is so superior that I think if I'm an old person, I would really
Wow.
want to be there.
Yeah. I loved everything you've just said. Especially on the first point when you mentioned about all this adaptability, right? As also science have shown that as people living abroad like us, it really help us to cultivate this sense of flexibility, adaptability, creative thinking, and really there is a kind of this, like you said, wherever you go, you feel home, and you can
Hmm.
always bring out the value and have different representation of those culture elements that you embody. And the second part I really love you said about 落叶归根, going back to the roots. Actually, that's
Hmm.
why I am launching this podcast. Is also my attempt to reconnect with my roots, with people that I have shared the similar heritage and background and culture. So yeah, Thank you for sharing. This really is very touching for me. As we're talking about your various experience living in different continents and countries, so how those experiences have shaped your artistic pursuit?
So, as you know, as an Asian, there's no such thing as pursuing an art career, right? Like
Right.
art is not really perceived as a legitimate, career path.
Career.
So that was really difficult growing up. And, even in the US, like there's some more leniency toward that. What's funny is I assume my parents don't want me to pursue art. So I went to UCLA and studied psychology instead.
Mm-hmm.
But
You
later
didn't ask?
on, I just assumed it wasn't an
Okay.
option. It's not like they encouraged it.
Yeah.
But I just did what an immigrant child's duty is to do: pursue something that, in a good school that is, some kind of medicine or law or accountant. All the
Yeah.
qualified
Typical path.
career path for an Asian person.
Yeah.
And not until later I realized that actually they didn't really oppose it. So there was an internal struggle I had. But coming to Berlin really was this, or still is perhaps, a playground for artists and creative people. I
Yeah.
always joke that if you throw a rock in Berlin, you probably hit an artist or a musician, or
Right.
so many people doing that here. However, I think it's also because it's so saturated and there's not a lot of money in Berlin. And at that time, I think it's changing. I do have to say it's changing. But at that time, so a lot of artists just, end up moving somewhere else to pursue or just give up
Right.
altogether. But for me personally, I think I wish I had the realization that I can be anything and do anything I want, and not waste so much time in agonizing into what would other people think, and how does me as an Asian look if I tell people I'm an artist. And there's still a lot of stigma and self-imposed stigma, if you will. And now I realize that I if I had known what I know today, I probably would have been more brave and actually take that path. But that being said, I was brave. I did, very pivot my career 10 years ago, and I don't regret.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. As we are living abroad, there's always a topic on the back of our head. I think you perhaps could relate is about taking care of our aging parents. How do you actually reconcile this moral or responsibility of taking care of them while still be able to live your own life abroad?
Yeah, there's this concept of like filial piety that is lost in translation in English, right? Like 孝顺. and And for me, it's drilled into our DNA, right? Like there's no way you don't think about your parents. Like, and I think for a lot of Asian kids, the mission is to kind of like fulfill your parents' wishes. And so,
Yeah,
yeah,
in some
it
way.
was a topic that sit on me for a very long time. Luckily, I have to say, I'm the second in the family. I have an older brother. So him being like the first male, a lot of the responsibility that befallen on him. And, thank goodness. I think
Yeah.
if it weren't for him, I don't think I can live the life that I've had. So, he stayed in Asia. He took care of my dad. My mom remained in California. We have plans to move her back to Taiwan, perhaps this year, and where there's healthcare and even elder citizen facilities and care. I mean, there's just so much there because there's like a really focus on caring for the elderly. But my dream is to build up my company enough that I can buy my mom an apartment. And that would be my like ultimate dream. And my ultimate goal is to be able to do that for her. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm definitely the black sheep of my family.
Yeah, I hear you. Like, I think as a single child in my family, this is the solo responsibility on myself. I'm still trying to find the solution on this. But what I'm trying to do nowadays is spend more time with them when I can, try to call them, connect with them, really respect you. I'm trying to move your mom back to Taiwan. And I think that's a really great thing that we can do to our parents. And talking about parents, I know that you've been through many challenges in the recent years, including losing your dad, your beloved cat, relationship, also a job. That's a tough time. How did those events and experience teach you about loss and grief? I would love to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Indeed, in the past 3 years, it's like when they say, and I was actually in Italy doing an artist residency when I received a call from my brother that, my dad has suddenly passed away. And from that moment on, it was one thing after another. I went to his funeral, I broke my leg. I was really hospitalized. And then, this person who I trusted deeply and I thought was the love of my life also abandoned me in a way. And then I had my cat fell off the roof and broke her spine and had to put her down. There was a lot. And I would say it was loss after loss after loss. And I was just sick and poor and absolutely emotionally, physically, and spiritually even broken. And I always tell people that I felt like I hit rock bottom and I took a shovel and dug another hole and fall into that hole. I can't imagine how much lower to fall at that point. And I really even lost sort of this will to continue in this life. I wasn't suicidal, but I didn't, wake up again. I would be okay with. I was just in so much agony and pain, and I think that is when it forced me to embark on this healing journey, reluctantly, but I had to, because if I don't do something, I can't go on. And so at that time, I think art also played a big role. I had the studio where I go, and sometimes I just go there to cry. Sometimes I just go there and bawl my eyes out and it didn't make any art. But, just being in that environment.
Safe place.
Yeah, a safe place, exactly. And, even doing a little bit of doodle, and things start to get better. And then when it gets a little bit better, you find the next step. And so because of my background, I also try everything, right? From Eastern modality to Western modality to everything else in between. So from the East, of course, they did the yoga, meditation, Tai Chi, Qigong, Chinese medicine, chanting. I even did like ancestral healing and, this whole thing. And then with the West, I did talk therapy, medication, hypnosis, Wim Hof, like the breathing technique, ice bath, journaling, recreational drugs, like
everything you can imagine.
Exactly. And on top of that, I did like cacao ceremony, ayahuasca, sensory deprivation, EFT tapping, you name it, I did it. Okay. And I think it was like this really big dive into this desperate need to heal that brought me across all these modalities. And what I learned from it is that healing is really, really personal. People want to find the great solution, right? Just do this, just take this class and you'll be, trust me, because I did it. And the thing is, I really found out that every wound and trauma is unique and every healing is unique. And literally no one on this planet can tell you do this or do that and it will help you. It's like everyone's path is different and only you know what it is. And you have to embark on it for you to find out what works for you.
Absolutely.
I took a little bit, I think everything helped collectively, everything helped a little bit in its own way. For me personally, I find meditation, journaling, like the quiet stuff, not the very active stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like the quiet stuff, meditation, I take myself out for a date every week where I'm doing something on my own without anybody else. I do a lot of journaling. I have a lot of journaling technique, which these are modalities I try to also teach in my Cool Auntie platform. But I think these are the few things that really got me out of the deep, dark hole. And then built on top of that, I did a lot of like self-development courses. And that is, once you get out of the hole and you kind of have a vision of the path you want to travel on, then how to be resourceful to get those things that you need to keep walking on that path. Yeah, I'm still on the journey. I'm not like completely healed, but I think a lot of times the blessing, it's like a blessing in disguise when you hit rock
Yeah.
bottom, because
Yeah,
I think I'm at a
absolutely.
much better place than it would have been even before my dad passed.
Yeah,
So
beautiful. Thank you. I see so many goals that in the insight that you've shared. You actually answered my next question about the practice that work for you in terms of healing and self-care. I definitely agree with you. The healing is a very deeply personal journey, and it's also a long journey. It perhaps could be a lifelong journey. I think we need to give ourselves grace and time for that process. I really loved that idea that you brought up about take yourself out for a date. I love it because oftentimes we always think love, romantic love, and we need a partner. But how about taking ourselves out for a date? It's the ultimate expression of self love. So yeah, I
absolutely.
love that idea. And as we are talking about love, this is the topic I always want to discuss with anyone, and especially with you. You have practiced so many technique and explore different paths to heal, and you have experienced many loss, and how this experience has taught you about love, perhaps maybe even changed your idea and understanding of love.
So yeah, so love was the reason I stayed in Berlin, and it might also be the reason I leave, because the reason I stayed partially was because I met this German guy, and we got along really well, and we started dating. And I have to say he was a really kind person, and he helped me out a lot, right? Like
Mm.
from opening a bank account to doing my amalgam, my taxes with
Yeah,
Elster,
I'm Maldon.
yeah, and he introduced me to Oktoberfest, my first Christmas market, and I even went as far as meeting the parents. But in the end, I think we all have, a lot of us have this like romantic notion of this like interracial relationship, right? That like
Mm,
if people from different backgrounds choose each other, then it must be true love. And
yeah.
I think um, there's a tendency to over romanticize interracial relationships, and I think we don't address the kind of like power dynamic that goes on in these relationships. And I think even till today, like this concept of Orientalism or yellow fever still exists. Like,
Mm,
like seeing Asian women as like this submissive or shy and demure creature that is there to serve, and then, we perceive like Western men as this like power status or like source of like income and wealth and stuff like that. I think having lived in Europe for so long and having dated so many people from all cultural backgrounds,
mm,
you very quickly realize that, this notion over romanticizing is really not based on facts.
yeah.
And yeah, so I think it led to a lot of disappointment. And so I think approaching love and dating, I think it's really healthy to see each other as individuals, right? A
Right.
person is not stereotypically packed up in this like cultural expectation of who they should
Hmm.
be. We should really approach them as a whole person with full faculties, with their personality, their quirks, and all this, and not coin them into a pigeonhole that feeds your own expectation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So that's what
Yeah,
I
I totally agree with you. I think nowadays this dating culture, not only between the interracial relationship, but also in general, a lot of people, maybe even including us, have sometimes perhaps a tendency to put people in a box, could be a race or look, or could be some sort of neurodivergent conditions. So I totally agree with you that we have to see people as who they really are, and look at them as a human being with their strengths, with their flaws, and that's how can we really connect.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now I would like to touch upon a bit of a perhaps sensitive topic for some people. As for me, I'm also approaching 40. I'm contemplating of having kids or not. It's always a back and forth decision that I cannot make up my mind. Could you perhaps share your thinking process on this topic?
So yes, it is a sensitive topic, and I certainly don't have the authority to give advice. However, I can share with how I arrived on my personal decision of not having children. And to give you a little bit of background, my parents got married through matchmaking, and they were really young. My mom was only 24, and my dad was, I think, 30. And my mom was actually studying to become a ballerina, and my dad was a judo master, and he was hoping to go advance his career in Japan. So they both have this like personal pursuit, but because of this, earlier I mentioned this like program, right? This prescribed life, you're at this age, you must get married now. So they got matched together, and they got married really quickly after they met, and very quickly formed a family. So at a young age, when I saw them, I think they love us, me and my brother, of course, but I always have the sense of they lost something, they didn't go after what, they truly wanted to do in their hearts. And they made that sacrifice so they can do this, traditional route. And so for me, I think growing up, I always have in the back of my head, I don't want to choose a path that would prevent me from pursuing what my heart wants me to do. And if my heart wants me to get married and have children and meet the right person, I believe that's the right path, I will absolutely do it. I have nothing against that, But for me, having watched my parents gone through this path made me very cautious about, really prioritizing what my heart tells me to do. Personally, I just never had that calling, the motherhood calling. There certainly were opportunities. I've dated several men who really want to be fathers, and I've been proposed to before. But I knew in my heart's heart, there's more that I want to accomplish in this life. So I didn't say yes to that. So I think in the end, you have to really ask yourself, what do you value the most? Right. And for a lot of people, without question, is having a family, have children. This is absolutely what my heart tells me to do. Then do it. Right. But for me, I think I value freedom above all else. And and I quite enjoy my role as the cool auntie, being the one that travels the world, bring back gifts to my nieces and nephews, and telling stories, and being an artist, and being able to pursue and set up company, have that leisure, have that time, have that flexibility. And for me, that's the path I choose. And I also realize that choosing this path means that I perhaps gave up something that I never knew I even wanted, or, so it wasn't a huge sit down, think forever decision for me. But I think if you dig deep enough into your heart, you do know. I think that's a personal question that each of us has to go and explore. And I think if you listen hard enough, you will know the answer to that.
Yeah, I really agree with you on the point about be true and align with your value, right? I think
Absolutely.
this value alignment really so essential for all areas in our lives, and help us and guide us to make decision that is authentic and is truthful. So yeah, thank you for sharing your perspective. And about the community, I'm really curious to know more, as in what's your learning experience from building this community, and what perhaps advice or ideas that you could share with other women audience who are also aspire to create their own business or their own community.
Yeah. I'm fairly new on this journey. So I'm a new entrepreneur. So I can't say I have a lot of like wealth of knowledge to share on what to do and how to do. And the success and failure of that is still pending and whatnot. But I think what inspired me to do this, first of all, I realized the power in community, right? And also within the community, the able, like what are we doing right now, right? To share stories, share experiences. And I think that's the most valuable thing we can have as humans, and especially as women. I
Yeah.
think we learn through each other. And so knowing that, I think there's a lack in community that supports people that doesn't prescribe to the traditional path. And I think these dialogues are very, very necessary to be had,
Right.
because you can easily find groups for single moms. You can find a single mom that stays home, mom of two that works. And, there's a lot of supportive community that targets mothers who's doing it alone. But it's really hard to find communities dedicated to people that didn't choose marriage and children. And I think there's almost like this undertone assumption that therefore they don't face challenges and problems. It's a
Yeah.
different set of challenges and problems. So absolutely we face that.
Yeah.
And not everyone who doesn't have kids actually chose this path. Some people just simply never met the right partner, or they have some reproductive issues. So this is a very sensitive topic, and I think we need a platform to address that, and to be
Yeah.
supportive, and to listen, and to learn.
Yeah.
And that's why I created the Cool Auntie. I don't have an entire objective layout. I don't have a total clear vision. I know I want to help. I know I want to uplift and empower. I think it's needed, it's necessary, and I want to provide resources, not only resources from women that I've learned from. I have a good friend that's actually getting a certificate in menopause, because menopause is
Yes, it's a huge
a
topic.
huge topic. Yeah. And so, she's getting certified, and, I have her as like a guest speaker in the Cool Auntie platform, and maybe teach a course. Yeah. I think collectively pulling women together is just so beautiful and so powerful.
Yeah.
And I think, that's the ultimate goal, is to let everyone has a sense of belonging inside a community that understands them, and simply to uplift, empower. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. When you talk about this community topic, it reminds me again about this sense of loneliness a lot of us have experienced, especially as you said, when you are going on a different path, when you look different,
Mm-hmm.
when you behave somehow, or you live a life which is different, you often feel lonely and not understood, not accepted. But having such a community to allow people to feel they can be themselves, they can show up as who they are, they have a bunch of people who are doing the same thing and
Mm-hmm.
love each other. This is amazing. So I would be really looking forward to hear more news from Cool Auntie, and invite you back again to talk more in the future.
It would be my honor and pleasure to share more down the road as well.
Knowing what you know now, looking back, what would you have done differently when you first moved abroad? Because a lot of Asian women actually are looking or planning to move abroad. So it would be nice to learn from you.
Like I said, I don't know where home is, so everywhere I go is technically abroad. But I can speak to moving to Berlin specifically. Looking back, two things I would have done. First one is immediately buy an apartment, because back then it
Right.
was so cheap, but
Cheap.
now it's insanely expensive. And secondly, I might invest in a noodle shop, because apparently noodles do very, very well in Berlin.
Okay. Yeah,
People are
yeah, I
making a
see
lot of
that.
monies with noodles. And so anyway, joking aside, I think I would have been more smart with my investments. But aside from that, I think also how I approach relationships. And by this, I mean the community that you exist in. Because what you have to understand is big cities like New York, London, Berlin, they're very transient kind of places. People come in and out of your life all the time. And we have a tendency when we come from a smaller town or, from a certain country, that we identify people that we're close to, and we want to be them to be everything to you and you to be everything to them, and have a best friend, and you want the relationship to last forever. And that's not realistic in a big city. So I think it's to learn to kind of like treasure everyone in your life and love them and respect them, but also learn when it is good to let it go, and be really good to people, but don't expect them to be exactly the same way back to you. I think there's also a tendency for Asian people to look at others with the expectation of how you treat them, they must treat you back. And that's just not how it works in a city like, especially a city like Berlin. And what I really learned is that whatever we need in life, the people that we need in our life, you will always find them. You will always find them, but they're going to come in different people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that friend that you need to cry, put your head on to cry about something, that person is always there, but it might not be the same person all the time. It might come in a different container, and learn to embrace that when the moment's right, but also to gently release it when the time is up. And you can't force any relationship. And I wish I had known that sooner, because I got so many heartbreaks from losing friends that just simply don't want to invest in the friendship anymore, losing lovers, losing mentors, confidant, and all this. And in the end, I realized that I've always have these figures in my life. They just constantly come in different humans.
Yeah.
And
I agree with you. I had similar experience also in the recent years, forming new friendship, relationship, but also letting go some others, which I think is an inevitable process of life, of growth as well. Cool. So looking at the future now, what are some of the exciting goals and projects do you have?
So as you know, besides from founding Cool Auntie, I'm also a visual artist. And during COVID, I was suffering from my loss. I was healing, and I actually taught myself how to perform surgery. This idea came to me.
Wow.
This idea came to me that we can fix our wounds by doing a surgery, opening the surface of the skin, put something in, take something out, and then sew it up, and we're healed. And how come we can't do that on an emotional level? So I decided to learn how to perform surgery, and I bought this like practice surgery kit. And I learned, and I sutured these silicone skin, and it's not easy. It's really difficult. So over time, I actually learned the basic skills of how to perform surgery, and I created this thing called the Somami Lab. Soma is the body, and Amie, my name, means beloved. So in a way, it's to love one's own body. And so Somami Lab was created where I eventually wanted to do kind of the symbolic healing ritual that comes in the form of a performative surgery. And I want to perform live surgery using these silicone body parts that I have built. And each of them would be a narrative of a different kind of trauma or a different kind of wound. And it's a work in progress. I have, if you go to my art website, you can see some examples of what I've done. But the ultimate goal for me is to one day to perform at the Tier Automatisches Theater in Berlin, which is an extension of the Humboldt University. It's this beautiful kind of amphitheater that back in the days, they actually did perform live surgeries in this theater before. So so in a way, it's a homage
very Berlin
to the culture of medicine, but also bringing the aspect of art into it. And it's like a crossroad between the two worlds. And I'm really, really excited about developing this further.
Yeah, sounds exciting. I mean, God forbid if ever Cool Auntie project doesn't work out, you have another profession to pursue. And it's quite the Asian parents' expectation, I guess,
Right,
from
exactly.
this perspective. Yeah, it's
My mom
amazing.
would be
Wow.
very happy. I would tell her
Yeah,
actually
but
ended
just
up
joking,
becoming
of
a
course.
surgeon.
Joking, but that's amazing. I would love to watch your, can I call it performance art?
Yeah, performance.
Yeah. Okay, it's wonderful. Thank you. The idea of perform surgery on emotional
Yeah,
wounds is fascinating.
yeah. It all
Thank you.
roots back to healing.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I when I was 10, I had a tumor on my neck, and I thought I
Oh,
was
I'm
going to
sorry.
die. Yeah, I found this hard ball on my neck, and then I didn't tell my family because I thought for sure I was going to die.
Oh no.
And one day my mom is like, "What's that on your neck?" And then I finally told her, and I thought I was like saying goodbye. And then she took me to the doctor, and he looked at it. He's like, "Oh, it's probably just like a benign tumor, but we need to take it out." And so at the clinic, he did some local anesthesia, cut a hole, took it out, and put it into a jar. And it's like this pink little benign, basically a cyst. He put it in a jar and gave it to me. And I thought it was the most miraculous thing ever because I thought I was going to die, and he just cut a little hole and then took this out, and then now I'm going to live. And
Yeah.
so I see the transformative power of medicine, and I
Mm.
really want to take that and kind of infuse it into a metaphor and put it into art form, because I think when I perform these narrative surgery, I'm very intentional in using symbols inside the skin. What I take out, what I put in, how I sew it up. It's all a story about my personal trauma at this point. And I really do feel better after I performed the surgery. So I
Yeah.
think there is a power in rituals that help you heal on a spiritual level.
Yeah. As you're describing this process, I feel this energy of as if you are performing this surgery on yourself, on your own emotional
In a way, I
wounds.
was. In a way, I
Yeah,
was.
healing is happening on yourself to start
Absolutely.
with. This
Yeah.
is beautiful. It's really, really touching. Thank you, Amy, for sharing those amazing and inspiring stories. And if you can share one final piece of wisdom from your journey, such rich journey in so many different countries, cities, so many different industries, so many different talents that you embody, and the healing journey from loss, from love as well, what would that be?
I would say don't hold yourself back by society's perception of who you are. Reinvent yourself, write your own story. Don't care about what anybody else thinks. I think culturally we like to put people into little brackets, and unfortunately I think it's a very small bracket for Asian women because we don't have a lot of role models to look toward and say, point at and say, oh, I want to be like her. And I think there's more and more things are changing, but I think it's still not enough. And I would say, like, be a trailblazer, make your own path, step out of the narrow bracket that the world has assigned to us. So many of us are like afraid to do something because you never saw someone else in your family do it, or someone who looked like you do something that you want to do.
Yeah.
And my advice would say, be the first, right? Why not be the
Yeah, be
first?
the first.
Break the mold, break the generational trauma,
Yeah.
be brave enough to change the script. And
Yeah,
and I think that would be my advice to everyone, is to write your own story bravely and to yeah, mark your own path and own it.
I love it. I love it. I love the spirit, the courage. Let's be the first. Thank you
Be the
so much,
first.
Amy.
You are.
And with that, how can people find and connect with you?
So professionally, you can find me on LinkedIn, but I'm also on Instagram as the cool auntie, and I also have my artist website, amielinart.com.
Sounds good. I will leave all your contact
Thank
in the
you.
show notes. And it's truly amazing have this conversation with you, Amy. I've been so touched by all the stories and wisdom that you've shared. with me and the audience. And I would love to have you back to the podcast. And I can't wait to see what's coming up for you personally, also for the cool auntie community. And thank you so much for being here. It's really a pleasure.
Thank you, Lynn. It's been a pleasure to be here and to share such an inspirational conversation with you. And I hope to come back again and have continue this dialogue.
Yeah, wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed it, please take a moment to subscribe to my podcast and share with a friend of yours. Your support means a world to me and help more people discover this podcast. I'm your host, Ling. Remember, your stories is yours to write. Make it a masterpiece. Until next time, stay well.